new path. So before we get down to the discussions and the chant, let us first sit up straight, close our eyes, with our hearts filled with gratitude. Let's pray together. Divine Mother, Heavenly Father, friend, beloved God, great masters of Kriya Yoga, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Shri Yukteswar Ji, beloved Gurudev, Paramhansa Yogananda Ji, saints and sages of all religions, dear friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow at thy feet. Dear Masters, be with us here today. Help us to feel thy tangible presence with us. Help us to tune into thy consciousness, thy bliss. May we always walk this path of Kriya Yoga in perfect attunement with thy grace, thy will. We are thine, be thou eternally ours. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. This is a very auspicious week. On 26th September, that was Tuesday, we had Lahiri Mahashaya's Mahasamadhi Day, and tomorrow is his birth anniversary. So tune into Lahiri Mahashaya because it was through him that this whole lineage started. Had it not been for him going to Ranikhet and being initiated and asking Babaji for permission to give Kriya freely to even householders, those who seek, sincerely, and Babaji agreeing for that, we wouldn't have been here. So it's a lot of grace during this week. There's a lot of, let us be very grateful and tune into Lahiri Mahashaya and the whole lineage of gurus. So let us start with chant. Let's pause for a moment, taking this chant in, staying absorbed, gazing up at the point between the eyebrows, calling on to all the gurus in our lineage, Babaji, Jesus Christ, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Shri Yukteswarji, beloved Gurudev, Paramhansa Yogananda ji. Let's try to tune ourselves to their divine consciousness. Keep calling out to them. For guidance. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So, the last chapter we saw, uh, where Swamiji having, uh, in couple of chapters before this, he was trying to conform to the people around them, to their standards, and then he said it's not making sense. So he's kind of again walking back, and the last chapter where he is, trying to come to his, I mean, instinctively, intuitively, he was trying to come to his own conclusion of what it is, what is really he's seeking, what is truth. And he felt that, to start, he should love, and he should trust, because that is how, I mean, you can't be suspicious of everyone and kind of close yourself and be, joyful. So he but the whole problem was he was trusting this world, people of this world, um, and the only trouble in that is that this world is made of duality. So it is not a perfect world. So if we keep our complete trust in the world, it is going to disappoint us, right? And that is exactly what he realized. He was trying a non-attachment, and then, trying to trust, and then it did hurt him a lot. He was quite disappointed in having placed, and that kind of, gave him a lesson that anything less than God, we shouldn't trust. Only in God we can place complete trust, because He is not going to break it. So, so as we see, he's like kind of trudging along, uh, constantly seeking, constantly asking questions to himself, discussing with his friend who is, you know, as ignorant, but still, he was also interested. So they would talk, the whole process, but it was very intellectual. They were very, on finding those answers on a superficial level where the answers don't lie. Um, so now let us go to the next chapter, listen to Swamiji and reading out this chapter. It's kind of long, and then we will discuss.
Chapter 9. He gathers strength for the climb. At about this time in my life, I had an interesting dream. I was living with many other people in a torture chamber. For generations, our families had lived here, knowing no world but this one. The possibility of any other existence simply never occurred to us. One awoke, one was tortured, and at night, one found brief respite in sleep. What else could there be to life? We didn't particularly mind our lot. Rather, we imagined ourselves reasonably well off. Oh, to be sure, there were bad days, but then there were also good ones. Days together sometimes, when we were less tortured than usual. The time came, however, when a handful of us began to think the unthinkable. Might there, we asked ourselves, just possibly be another, a better way of life? Moments snatched when our torturers were out of earshot, and we could share our doubts with a few friends, served to kindle our speculations. At last we determined that there simply had to be an alternative to being tortured. A small group of us decided to rebel. We laid our plans carefully. One day, rising together from our tasks, we slipped up behind the torturers, slew them, and escaped. Sneaking cautiously out of the great room, fearing lest armies of torturers be lying in wait for us outside, we encountered no one. The torture chamber itself, it turned out, occupied only the top floor of a large, otherwise empty building. We walked unchallenged down flights of stairs, emerging from the ground floor onto a vast, empty plain. Confined as we'd been our whole lives in the torture chamber, the horizon seemed incredibly distant. Joyfully we inhaled the fresh air. Gazing about us, we all but shouted the previously never imagined word, freedom. Before departing the building forever, we glanced up at the top floor, scene of the only life we'd ever known. There, to our astonishment, we saw the very torturers we thought we'd slain. They were going matter-of-factly about their business as though nothing had happened. Amazed, we looked to one another for an explanation. Suddenly the answer dawned on me. "Don't you see?" I exclaimed. "It's ourselves we have conquered, not the torturers." With that realization, I awoke. I felt that this dream held an important message for me. The torture chamber, located as it was on the top floor of the building, symbolized the human mind. The torturers represented our mental shortcomings. The emptiness of the rest of the building meant that once one has overcome his mental torturers, there are no more enemies left to conquer. All human suffering, in other words, originates in the mind. We cannot slay universal delusion. All we can do is slay our own mental torturers. They will always remain on the scene, inflicting on others their painful lessons. My dream, I felt, held a divine message for me. Its implication was that the time had come for me to seek a higher way of life. My problem was how to seek it. I knew nothing of great saints who had communed with God. To me, the very word saint connoted only a person of frail goodness, not someone filled with divine love, and certainly not someone soaring in ecstasy. All I knew of religion were the stylized church services I had attended, the uninspired ministers I had heard, insecure men who sought support for their faith in the approval of others, not in the unbribable voice of their own conscience. Though I didn't realize it at the time, my ignorance concerning the spiritual path was my own chief torturer. It hindered me from seeking the good for which my soul longed. Subordinate to ignorance, there were other, more evident failings. Doubt, for example. Had I approached truth by love, I might have gone straight to the mark. But I was trying to think my way to wisdom. God I looked upon as something to be thought about, not someone with whom I could commune. I wanted desperately to trust, even to love, but I had no idea what or whom specifically to trust or to love. I had reached a point where I thought about God almost constantly, but he remained silent, for I never called to him. Another of my mental torturers was fear. Certainly I had never considered myself a fearful person, but that was because in most matters I was not attached. In one test of my non-attachment, however, I had shown myself exceedingly vulnerable. I feared disappointment from others. Peace in this world depends on cheerfully relinquishing attachment to all things, even to ego. As long as I strove to protect my sense of personal worth, I would suffer again and again, ever in essentially the same ways. I was not yet wise enough to see clearly, but at least my vision was improving. My dream about the torture chamber, conveying as it did a sense of divine guidance, had made me more aware of realities beyond those which could be known through the senses. This awareness, coupled with the trust and affirmation that I had worked on developing earlier, led me now to an interesting discovery. I hit upon what was, as far as I knew then, a novel theory. To be lucky, expect luck. Don't wait passively for it to come to you, but go out and meet it halfway. With strong positive expectation, combined with equally positive action, success will be assured. With this simple formula, I was to achieve some remarkable results. Not long after the new year, our first semester ended. At that time, Rod and one or two other friends flunked out of college. It was hardly surprising, considering the disdain all of us felt for the system. Their departure put me on my own now, in my efforts to understand life more deeply. My independence proved a wholesome opportunity. I visited Sue's dormitory occasionally, hoping in chats with a few of her friends to relive a little of the happiness I had known with her. But the pain of her absence was keen, and after a time I stopped going. In Sue's dormitory there lived a girl from India, a friend of Sue's named Indira Kipalani. Indira was perhaps the most beautiful girl I have ever seen. I had no romantic interest in her, but she was part of Sue's scene, which I enjoyed. Indira hinted more than once that she wished I would date her. One day I accepted her invitation to escort her to a Bryn Mawr dance. That evening I allowed myself to enter into her mood. Throwing myself merrily into the occasion, I became the perfect gentle knight, or alternatively, a kind of Arthur Murray. To my surprise, at one point everyone in the hall cleared the floor to watch us go whirling around. For me, however, the occasion was only merrymaking. I realized that Indira's attraction to me was based on an image that was not at all my true reality. Far from being the dashing young sportsman of her imagination, I was inwardly in my almost desperate search for the eternal verities, becoming more and more withdrawn from the normal social scene. How often our perception of others is merely a projection of our own concepts, desires, and conditioning. Though I was only 18, in comparing myself to Indira's image of the youth she admired, I felt positively ancient. Granted, this was only a subjective impression. One day when I went to Philadelphia for my weekly singing lesson with Marie Zimmerman, she noticed that I was in low spirits and inquired what was wrong. I related my little tragedy. "Ah," she exclaimed impatiently, "puppy love. I lived with my husband nearly 50 years. In all that time, our friendship kept growing deeper. Since his death, we are closer than ever. That is love." Offended, I told myself she simply didn't understand. But her words remained with me, gently reminding me in my deeper self that I probably had much in life yet to learn. My college classes had lost all appeal for me. I seldom mixed with the other students. To protect myself in my unhappiness, I put on an over-intellectual front, did frequent battle with words, and assumed an air of self-assurance in which there was considerably more affirmation than self-recognition. My heart was vulnerable, but my reason and will were unshaken. Mainly, however, I spent my days thinking, as if to wrest from life insights into its farthest secrets. Why, I asked myself, did the promise of joy so often prove a will-o'-the-wisp? And was it not essential to a well-ordered universe that love given be in some way returned? Again, where lay the pathway to true happiness? "Relax," cried Roberta one day, seeing me staring sightlessly out the window. "Can't you ever relax?" So the semester passed. In recollection, it all seems a grey mist. My draft board called me in for an examination, which I failed owing to weak eyesight. Resolved thereby was the dilemma whether or not to register as a conscientious objector. I had doubted whether I could register as one in completely good faith, since it wasn't a matter of my religious convictions. I simply knew with perfect certainty that even if my own life depended on it, I could never take the life of another human being. In April, Dad was sent to Romania as petroleum attaché to the U.S. diplomatic mission in Bucharest. My job at the last straw convinced me and everyone else, especially my employer, that whatever my mission in life, it was not to wait on tables. I kept absent-mindedly sitting down with groups of customers, quite forgetful that there were other tables waiting to be served, then forgetting to change the total on the bill when the customers increased their orders. I'm afraid I came close to being the last straw's last straw. My singing lessons were the only really bright spot in my life. Marie Zimmerman was a demanding teacher. After 6 months of weekly lessons, she stopped me one day in the midst of a song. "There," she cried triumphantly, "that note. That's how all your notes should sound." There were other compensations besides the sheer joy of learning from her how to sing. Once she said to me, if any singing teacher worthy of the name, I mean a real musician, were to hear you now, he would be impressed. And toward the end of the college year, she told me softly, "I am living for only one thing now, to see you become a great singer." She raised a hand impressively into the air. "It isn't only your voice. Others have good voices too. But you have a mind. You understand. Dear Marie, may I call you that now that you've left this world? To call you Mrs. Zimmerman seems too formal when addressing your soul. How sad I have been that I had to disappoint you. That was our last class together. I couldn't go back to you. I knew that to be a singer, even a world-renowned one, was not at all my calling. But maybe you are pleased with the fact that I have touched people with my gift, not for money, but for love. And maybe someday, too, if we meet in heaven or in some other lifetime on earth, I can sing for you again. One of my deepest prayers on the spiritual path has been that all the people I have ever loved be blessed with divine peace and joy. May you be even more blessed than most, for those fulfillments were what your own soul was actively seeking. As the college year began drawing to a close, my prolonged inattention to the daily class routine brought me to a rather awkward predicament. Most of my courses I was confident of at least passing, though barely. Greek, however, was a downright embarrassment. It became a standard joke in class to see whether I would recognize one or two Greek words in a paragraph when called upon to translate. I was a cinch for words like and the. That entire semester I did hardly 3 Greek assignments. As we prepared for the final exam, Dr. Post, our professor, remarked more than once, "Not everyone in this room need trouble himself to appear for that event." Every time he said this, the other students would glance at me and laugh. I determined to show up for the exam, however, and to pass it. It might take a bit of luck not to flunk, but then I reminded myself I also had my new theory on how to attract luck. Expect to be lucky, then meet luck halfway with a vigorous, positive attitude. Unfortunately, I felt anything but vigorous and positive towards the one activity that really mattered, study. A week before the day we were to sit for the exam, I finally picked up the textbook and glanced half-heartedly at the first page. It was no use. Giving up, I flung the book aside. Tomorrow, I assured myself, I'll study twice as long as I would have today. But the next day, my good intentions were again routed ignominiously. For the rest of that week, I showed persistence only in my continued willingness to procrastinate. Almost before I knew it, the last evening loomed menacingly above my head. And I hadn't studied at all. Even now, I fully intended to pass. But I can't imagine anyone in his right mind endorsing these roseate expectations. Necessity, it is said, is the mother of invention. Fortunately for me, my present extremity displayed the right maternal instinct. Out of the blue, an inspiration appeared. "You are a Greek," I told myself with all the concentration I could muster. I resolutely adjusted myself to this new identity. The results were astonishing. As an American, I had found the study of Greek difficult. Now, however, as a Greek, my own language came to me with surprising ease. Through some subtle channel in the network of consciousness that binds all men together, I felt myself suddenly in tune with Greek ways of thinking and speaking. Approaching this new language as an old friend, moreover, I no longer faced the age-old problem of the student who, while trying to attract knowledge with one half of his mind, pushes it away with the other half by his unwillingness to learn. My entire mental flow was unidirectional. For 2 hours, I absorbed Greek grammar and vocabulary like a dry sponge in water. At last I could hold no more. The following morning, Mother Necessity gave birth to another inspiration. Our class had been studying the New Testament in the original Greek. Dr. Post had told us that we'd be asked to translate a portion of that scripture into English. This morning, then, mindful of my theory on attracting luck, it occurred to me to turn to the King James translation of the Bible. I had time enough only to read one chapter, but I thought if my luck held, this would be the chapter from which the passage would be selected. It was. The exam that year, as it turned out, was exceptionally difficult. Only 2 students passed it. My theory on luck was vindicated, however. I was one of those 2. From this experience, I learned several useful lessons. For one, the mind's power for positive accomplishment, once it learns to resist its own no-saying tendency, is almost limitless. Much of what people do indeed amounts only to pushing simultaneously on opposite sides of a door. Working themselves to exhaustion, they yet accomplish little or nothing. If they would only learn to say yes to life and to all its challenges, with the full conviction of their being, their capacity for success might be expanded almost to infinity. The discovery of the latent power within me and within everyone was important for me, but even so its interest was secondary to another problem that eluded me still, the secret of happiness. Is not joy, I asked myself, what all men in their hearts are really seeking? Why then do so few people experience it? And why is it so common for people to suffer in the very pursuit of happiness? Toward the end of the semester, it occurred to me that perhaps the fault lay with our restless lifestyle in America. How, I asked myself, could anyone find true happiness while chasing ever-elusive rainbows, satiating himself with sense pleasures? Years later, on learning that the cow in India commands special affection, an amusing comparison occurred to me. The Indian is himself in some ways cow-like, slowly ruminative, reflectively chewing the cud of his ideas. By contrast, Americans who love dogs seem actually to have a certain affinity with them as they dash about in mad pursuit of endless and quite unnecessary goals, eagerly wagging their tails in an effort to be liked. Thoreau's statement in Walden impressed me. Of a life of luxury, the fruit is luxury. For the materialist, the heights of inspiration are unimaginable. The worst disease of modern life is, I concluded, its superficiality. True joy is ever creative. It demands fresh, vital, intense awareness. How, I thought impatiently, will happiness worthy of the name ever be felt if one is too superficial to hold an unconventional thought? Material pleasures and acquisitions cannot bring anyone happiness. It is not unusual for this kind of judgment to be met with indulgent smiles, as though the sheer frequency with which it is made especially by the young, rendered it invalid. Considering the fact, however, that it is arrived at more or less independently by so many who seek honest values, I think it might be wise to ponder whether it may not hold an element of truth. At any rate, my own solution that year to the shortcomings I identified with life in America was to travel abroad. I imagined people in less industrialized countries turning to their daily tasks with a song on their lips and inspiration in their hearts. Nearby Mexico surely was such a country. I would spend my summer vacation there among simple, happy, spontaneous, genuine human beings. Getting there was my first problem. If I took a job to earn the money for the journey, my vacation might end before I could save enough. How then, short of robbing a bank, could I get rich quick? What my dilemma called for, obviously, was another application of my theory on luck. Affirming a bright, positive attitude, I cast about hopefully for a solution. Our college yearbook, I remembered, offered cash prizes for a variety of literary contributions. If I won a large enough prize, my problem would be solved. I leafed through the book. Most of the prizes listed were small, $10, $15, $25. But then a more promising figure caught my eye, $100. This amount would take me far indeed. Eagerly, I checked to see what I must do to win it. Then my heart sank. The requirement was for an essay on the subject, the basic principles underlying the government of the United States. Some law professor probably had coughed up this legal tidbit. Why, I thought with a sigh, must educators continually place the highest price on the driest matter? Who would ever write an essay on such a ponderous subject? I was on the point of passing on to other prospects when the answering thought came. That's right, who would? Examining the information more closely, I found no one listed as having won this prize the previous year. I checked several earlier yearbooks. None of them showed a winner. Perhaps there was hope after all. Ignorant though I was of the legal or historical points implied in the topic, if mine was the sole entry. Anyway, I reflected, I wasn't completely ignorant. At least I knew America's basic principles as they are popularly defined: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That brief phrase might not make much of an essay, but what if I took a fresh approach to it? Would the judges decide I had skirted the issue if, for example, I examined our present-day society in the light of how truly it was living up to those principles? Here, at least, I'd be on familiar ground. Dividing my essay into 3 chapters, life, liberty, and the pursuit of property, I demonstrated how, by our relentless acquisitiveness, we were depriving ourselves of all 3 of our basic rights, life and liberty as well as happiness. My paper was the sole entry and would therefore have won the prize anyway. But I was told afterward that the faculty had passed it around thoughtfully among themselves. Another prize offered in the yearbook was of $15 for the best poem submitted. Though this was hardly big money, it seemed worth a stab. I already had a few poems completed that I could submit. In this effort, I knew I faced competition. The Campus Poetry Club had been debating which of its members would walk away with the prize. They'd already made clear their view that I, who wasn't a member, didn't stand a chance. In the past, we'd crossed swords on the subject of solitary versus group creativity. To me, a poetry club seemed a contradiction in terms. I saw it as a victory for my own point of view when this prize came to me. Thus, with $115 in my pocket, before the vacation had even started, I decided I had enough money for the journey. If I found later that I needed more, Lady Luck would no doubt provide it. Barely 19 years old, never before on my own, and with my parents far away in Romania, I considered myself an adventurer indeed. Before leaving for Mexico, I took a short trip to Massachusetts in order to visit Rod. Soon thereafter, my great odyssey began. Hitchhiking southward, I made use of a return trip train ticket that I held from New York to Philadelphia. From Philadelphia, I planned to continue hitchhiking, armed now with my until now successful formula for attracting luck, and burdened with nothing but a knapsack. A young couple seated behind me on the train noticed the knapsack and engaged me in conversation. Was I a hiker? They themselves were enthusiastic youth hostelers. We chatted pleasantly. Soon we were singing folk songs together. By the time we reached Philadelphia, we were like old friends. They invited me to spend the night at their family home in Ardmore, the town before Haverford on the main line. This home turned out to be no mere residence, but a veritable mansion. Their hospitality, too, was extraordinary. A member of the family was about to be married. Relatives were arriving from distant parts. Food, fit for the most educated palate, was being served at every meal. Lady Luck, I reflected, seemed particularly well disposed towards me. The following morning, as I sat in the living room, preparatory to leaving, the dowager of the clan entered and took a chair next to mine. Her smiling manner hinted at good news. I have a nephew, she began, who is being sent by his firm to Mexico City. He will be leaving tomorrow by car. As he is traveling alone, I'm sure he would appreciate company. Do you think you might like to go with him? A 3,000-mile ride. Lady Luck was taking a most welcome interest in my case. Bob Watson, the nephew, not only took me along, but appointed me his extra driver, thereby paying all my travel expenses from his expense account. When we reached Mexico City, he put me up in his home. Thus my money, which I found had less purchasing power than I'd imagined, lasted me the entire summer. Bob and later his wife Dorothy, who joined us later, were the kindest of friends to me. Our Mexican adventure was as new and fascinating for them as it was for me. Together we shared its daily lessons, rewards, and comic twists as we reported our new experiences to one another in the evenings. Recalling my impromptu system for learning Greek, I resolved now to learn Spanish the same way. The day we crossed the border at Nuevo Laredo, I told myself with deep concentration, "You're a Mexican." Some hours later, having carefully rehearsed my words, I entered a restaurant and asked for a glass of water to drink, taking pains to get the accent as right as possible. An American tourist lady was standing nearby. Hearing me speak, she promptly boosted my confidence by exclaiming in astonishment, "Why, you're a Mexican!" In 1 week, by following what was, I realized, a definite principle for self-education, I was speaking Spanish well enough to carry on protracted, if halting, conversations on a wide variety of subjects with people who spoke no English. By the end of 2.5 months, my Spanish was fairly fluent. The principle, I discovered, is to put oneself completely in tune with whatever subject one wants to master. Concentration. Anyone can do well if he will attune himself sensitively to his subject and resolutely exclude from his mind any thought of the task's foreignness. I have tested this principle many times since then, in learning to write music, to play musical instruments, to paint, to understand some of the deeper aspects of numerous subjects, both abstract and practical, to attract money when I needed it, to found a successful community, and to receive helpful answers to countless questions, whether during meditation or while working or lecturing. Always, the system has taken me far deeper into my subject than intellectual study alone could ever have done. Friends also to whom I have taught this principle have had remarkable success with it. The principle has many ramifications, one of which is my theory on attracting luck. I've learned that a strong, positive affirmation of success is more effective when it is sensitively attuned to one's goal and protected from the thought of possible failure. This innocence of the chances of failure is largely responsible, I think, for the phenomenon popularly known as beginner's luck. An English girl of my acquaintance in Mexico City, I mentioned her earlier in connection with her Christian Science beliefs, once told me, a few weeks ago, Mummy and I accompanied Daddy to the racetrack. He goes often, but for us it was the first time. He spent most of the afternoon making fun of our system for betting. We'd choose a horse, you see, because we liked the cute white spot on its nose, or because we liked its name. Daddy's system was more scientific, but would you believe it? He usually lost, whereas we won every time. If my theory is valid, a beginner's temporary advantage over more seasoned players is that not knowing the obstacles before him, his expectations are entirely positive. Of course, ignorance of these obstacles also places limitations on his success. It takes sensitive awareness of all aspects of a subject, including its difficulties, to achieve genuine mastery. I had an opportunity during my stay in Mexico to test the mind's power in another direction also. Near the end of summer, I succumbed to a debilitating combination of diseases: streptococcal infection, tonsillitis, dysentery. It was several days before I was even strong enough to go see a doctor. When at last I did so, he hurried me off urgently to a hospital. "You'd better reconcile yourself," he told me, "to staying here at least 2 weeks." Worried that I might not be able to afford such a long stay, I made a few discreet inquiries and found my fears amply justified. To get money from America would have been difficult, though Dad had left emergency funds there for us boys. The most obvious solution was for me to get well at once. "You're in perfect health," I told myself firmly, saturating my mind with the thought of well-being and rigidly excluding any slight indulgence in the thought that I was ill. Within 2 days, I left the hospital, fully cured. Years later, a friend corroborated my belief in the mind's healing power. He had once worked as a physiotherapist in a polio sanitarium. While there, he had noticed that the poor patients, who couldn't afford a long stay, were far more likely to recover than the wealthy ones. His conclusion was that the strong desire to get well, based on dire necessity, generated the energy the body needed for healing. In the rich patients, the longer time spent there caused their paralysis to become ingrained. My Mexican adventure proved on the whole exciting, interesting, and fun. Even though in its innocent exposure to a wide variety of experiences, it bore some resemblance, as Dad put it later, to the travels of Pinocchio. I didn't derive from it, however, what I'd been most keenly seeking: a better way of life. I'd hoped, if nothing else, to find more laughter there, more human warmth, more inspiration. For a time I imagined I was actually finding these desiderata, but then I realized that what I was experiencing was only my own happy sense of adventure. Meanwhile, the people around me were trudging through the same dull round of existence as the people back home. Mexicans differed from Americans only superficially. In essence, both were the same. All of them lived, worked, bred, and died. Solomon Grundy's all. The imaginations of a rare few anywhere soared above mundane activities. Worse still, from my own point of view, I found that I, too, was basically no different whether in Villa Obregón and Cuernavaca or in Scarsdale. I experienced the same physical discomforts, the same need to eat and sleep, the same loneliness. I could appreciate more fully now Thoreau's statement, with which he dismissed the common fancy that a person was wiser for having travelled abroad. I have travelled a good deal, he wrote, around the town of Concord. He had, too. He knew more about his hometown and its environs than any other man living. One day he was walking through the fields with a friend. The friend lamented that no trace any longer remained of the indigenous tribes. Thoreau replied, "Why, their traces are everywhere." Stooping over, he picked up an arrowhead from the ground. His friend had seen it only as a pebble. The important thing, I realized, is not what lies around us, but the mental attitude with which we look. Answers will not be found merely by transporting our bodies from one clime to another. To those people who expect to find abroad what they have overlooked at home, especially in themselves, Emerson's words are a classic rebuke. Travel is a fool's paradise. In college that fall, I was discussing with a few friends a movie we'd all seen called The Razor's Edge. It is a tale about a Westerner who traveled to India and, with the help of a wise man he met there, found enlightenment. "Oh, if only I could go to India," cried a girl in our group fervently, "and get lost." Newly returned as I was from my Mexican adventure, I had few illusions left concerning travel as the solution to the human predicament. "Whom would you lose?" I chuckled. "Certainly not yourself." Illness towards the summer's end and disappointment at not finding what I had hoped for in Mexico left me a little dispirited for a time. I continued my search for reality, but did so with less than my normal enthusiasm. It is a striking fact that until my faith returned in all its former vitality, Lady Luck withheld from me further proofs of her favor.
So many things to ponder on, so many lessons here, starting with that dream of his, where, I mean, he has himself explained what it meant. He says that, I mean, just think about it, where he says that, every day people, they get up, they get tortured, someday they get more tortured. But, it never occurred to him or others that there was any existence apart from this. Isn't this also what Maya creates for us? I mean, we are born in this world and we think of this as reality. We grow up, we study, we go to school, we go to college, we get a job, we are like, getting married, having kids, and growing old and dying. Nobody thinks there's anything different. So, when the child is growing up, people are more concerned about them getting marks, then getting into the good college, then, getting a good spouse, the children, grandchildren. So even if you aren't, others are more concerned because they don't think there is anything apart from this. I mean, if you are not doing this, then what? What will you do? So it's the same thing, right? Here also, the kind of delusion we are living in. And he says that the torturer, when they finally escape, he says that it is all that the top floor of the building is basically our mind, with the human mind. Torturer, what are they? He says our mental shortcomings. And for himself, he says that my ignorance concerning the spiritual path was my own chief torturer. It hindered me from seeking the good for which my soul longed. He later on says, he was saying that, he was thinking of God all the time. Not someone with whom he didn't know till he met Master that God is someone you relate to, you commune with. He's not somebody who's up there, in some antiseptic cloud sitting there judging us. But this is what it is. So he says, I wanted desperately to trust, even to love, but I had no idea what or whom to trust or to love. I had reached a point where I thought about God almost constantly, but that was the problem. He was thinking of God constantly. And he says God remained silent. Sorry. For I never called to him. It is as simple as that. He is master, as master said, that God has everything. What he doesn't have is our love. Um, so no, we are indifferent to God. But right now, Swamiji doesn't know how to approach God. So he's thinking about God. He's saying all the time. Other shortcomings, he's saying, I fear disappointment from others. Because of what he had encountered in the last chapter we read. So, this can be one of our takeaways, point to introspect on. What is our, what are our mental torturers? All of us have. I mean, just like he said, for me it's fear to trust anyone because he might be disappointed, or love anyone, or again he's saying peace in. He says peace in this world depends on cheerfully relinquishing attachment to all things, even to ego. In fact, more to ego. Because ego is the one to which everything else, it's a pole to which everything else is hanging on, right? So this should be our, this week, let us go through it. Just sift through our introspect and see what is it that is stopping us? What is our mental torturer? What is that is not allowing us to progress further on the spiritual path, to, as Swamiji says, freedom, something that is holding us back. What are they? So, introspect every night, as Master said before sleeping. You should introspect. So, this can be one of the things that we can start thinking about. What is it? So, once we become aware, as Master said, awareness precedes control. We don't even know most of the time. As he's saying that they were pretty happily living in that world where every morning they'll get up, get tortured, and go back to sleep in the night because they didn't know any other world. And similarly, for us, probably we aren't even aware that these are the things that are stopping us from our freedom, our march towards freedom, which is our, you know, right. It is our right. As the soul freedom is our right. And what are they? So once we identify, is when we can start, overcoming them. Okay. So next he says. Um, where he says that his friends went away. Anybody would say that, oh God, these were the people I was hanging out with. They have gone. What will I do? He says, my independence proved a wholesome opportunity. This is again a very good attitude to have, that everything that happens in our life, to look at them rather than, oh, this has happened or that so every challenge as an opportunity. More probably, there's something better waiting for us. So similarly, he had that, non-attachment that he was practicing also. So that kind of helped him, and he thought that that is giving him more time to, in his quest, rather than spending it with friends and roaming around and all. And he talks about, that girl that Indian girl, where he says that she was projecting on him an image that she wanted for, as her partner, which he wasn't. And that is where he's saying how often our perceptions of others is merely a projection of our own concepts, desires, and conditioning. It's got nothing to do with whether that person is actually, that. As Patanjali said, that the one of the obstacles to spiritual progress, or the freedom, he writes in that first chapter, first pada, which he calls Samadhi pada. And in that he says that the one of the obstacles is our own, perceptions and inferences. We come to our own inferences based on what we think is happening, which is not true. And like he says that, I am, even though I'm only 18, I am quite ancient, and I was not exactly what she was wanting for herself, but she had projected on him a certain image and she was more in love with that image than what the person actually was. Aren't we like that most of the time? Most of the time, with people also, with situations, we want it in a certain way, so we project our expectation, our and we are happy about it, and that is why then later on we are disappointed when we realize that no, things are not really as we want them to be, and that is where the disappointments come in. So again, he's saying the next page, in page number 18, he says, mainly, however, I spent my days thinking, as if to wrest from life insights into its farthest secrets. He didn't know that to get those insights, to intuitively receive those answers, we need to go beyond thinking, right? So, and so because he was constantly thinking and the answers were not coming, kind of he was getting tense. Where his roommate finally said, "Relax, can't you ever relax?" This is again, one of the main things that we learn when we come to the path of meditation. What is meditation? It's complete relaxation. So the more we tense ourselves, and unfortunately, even in meditation, what happens is sometimes we keep a kind of count on what needs to happen, what should happen. We keep an expectation that today is meditation, I should see this. So you kind of start keeping an expectation, and even that becomes a tense. So tension. So the whole point is to let go, to go beyond thinking, beyond intellectualizing anything, and that is when we start experiencing things, and that is where when we have insights into anything. So that is where he was going wrong, right? Because there was nobody yet to tell him that what for his quest, what is the way out. So, and then the only good point in his life at that point, it seems like, the singing. Then last class we did discuss that, uh, where she started to think that he has such a beautiful voice, he can go on to become a famous singer. And that's the point when he stopped going to her, because he knew what he didn't want, though he still didn't know what exactly was he looking for. He knew that there was something that he was seeking which was not available in this world, yet what was it, he didn't know. So, and in many talks of Swamiji, he humorously tells this, that after 6 months, she said, "That note, that is how all your notes should sound." And she was uncompromising. She didn't accept, wherever he was placing till then, till he got to that state of perfection. And then Swamiji would always say, 6 months and one note I got right. So, then it's such a beautiful note he writes to her, this since she has passed, that I couldn't go back to you, I knew. So he is like, kind of sending blessings to the soul, because it had played a, he loved her for what she was, and she was a very enriching person. She was seeking something, that happiness, that joy, and she was spiritually, even though she wasn't really on a spiritual path, but she had the right things that needs to for a person to be spiritual. So that is why he's saying, I just, may you be even more blessed than most for those fulfillments where what your own soul was actively seeking. Okay, this again is a very important thing that Swamiji talks about. One, he talks about that, he has said in many of his talks that e- everything, you want luck, meet luck halfway. You want joy, meet joy halfway. You want, I mean, even in your meditation, you want to experience peace or joy. It's not like, you just sit down and think that, joy is going to come somewhere from somewhere. He said, meet it halfway. And that is where he's talking about, um, everything. I mean, you want to learn something new, where he says get into the heart of it, get to the core of it. And that is where he says, when he wanted to learn Greek, he says, you are a Greek with all the concentration. That this is, he's going on continuously coming back to that. So it is not like, oh, I want to learn something, I say, oh, I am that. It's not going to work that way. With all your concentration, you just go into the core of it and affirm it. Affirmation is something that is, and then he goes on to say that he was able to clear. I mean, there were only two people who cleared, and one of them was he. Another thing he says is say yes to life. This is something Swamiji throughout used to say, that say yes to life, and then everything just falls into place. The moment we say no, we are blocking the energy, that the grace, the energy that comes. So even if oftentimes he said that if somebody says do this, he says just say yes. You might not know how to do it, but the moment you say yes, you place yourself in that, the flow of that grace, and somehow there will be people coming to help you, or things just sort themselves out. So this is a very important principle that he always, I mean, this as Ananda, the things that are principles on which Ananda stands is say yes to life. People are more important than things. Yato dharma tato jaya. These were the certain things that Swamiji never compromised on. And many times, even Naya Swami Asha would always say that, he would say, do this. You don't know, I mean, you have never done such a thing, but they would say yes. And then they'll go, at that moment, they'll not even think of how am I going to sort this out. Yes. And then later on, things just sort out. So practice this. It is an important principle. It's a universal principle. If you say that, the moment we say yes, we open ourselves to possibilities, to the help from the universe, for the grace to flow, for masters, especially for those of us who are on the spiritual path, for masters to help us, for masters to answer us how to do it. We have their guidance all the time. The moment we open ourselves to it. And here he says that, okay, 5 minutes more probably. He says that, he's constantly thinking, he's looking for secrets to happiness. He says, what is everybody seeking? Master always used to say there are only two things that a man is seeking: to escape suffering, to experience happiness. So this is, I mean, Swamiji, is again in his intellectual way is trying to come to that. He says it is not joy what all men in their hearts are really seeking, but are they experiencing it? And then he is also saying that how can they experience, like especially he's talking about America, where this restless lifestyle, and you're constantly on a move, you're constantly, as Master used to say, spinning on the edge of the spin wheel. What happens is you're so off the center that you go flying off. And that is what he is also coming to the conclusion that Americans are not. And where he is comparing India with cow like, because we he had, I think I heard a talk by Swamiji where he also said that in those days, now there is no space, people in India are also starting to live in apartments, but in those days, uh, what would be the Indian keep in his house is a cow, right? And that is what he's talking about. That cow is revered, and the Indian himself is like that. Quite centered. He would slowly ruminate, reflect. So it is not like jumping all over the place, unlike the Americans. And he's saying that because Americans keep dogs, and the dogs are always jumping around and wagging his tail and running from. And he's saying it's like they dash about in mad pursuit of endless and quite unnecessary goals, just like dogs. What most people don't know, what are they running after? It's like material pleasure, success, material pleasure. Once Master asked one very rich man in America, he had a lot of money, and he said, "Are you happy? You have so much money." And the man said, "No, I'm not. I don't think I'm happy," is what he said. So, this happiness, we think that, if we have more and more of material things, luxuries and money and everything, we will be happy. Only to realize that happiness is not really dependent on the material success. Yes, money is needed. Money is needed, but there has to be a balance. It is not completely dependent on that. Okay, so then he's talking about, he was using a lot of affirmations where he says affirming a bright positive attitude, and he was like meeting Lady Luck midway. And so it so happened that one, he kept saying that he was completely, concentrating on it, and there was no doubt. Most of the time what happens is we say, oh, I will now, start depending, I'll say that, I will meet luck halfway, and he'll say, okay, this is going to happen, I'm sure this is going to happen. But at the back of our mind, there will always be a question saying, will it really? That kind of blocks it. Like how Master said that, even now, he was talking to a group of monks, and he said, you affirm that you are free, you can be free this moment. And then one monk asked, just by affirming, Master, that I am free, I won't be free, right? Master said that just by starting, having that doubt, you killed it. I mean, it is not going to happen. So that doubt is what. So you are like kind of pulling it in two different directions. One is trying to pull you forward, and the other one is, so you kind of, being pulled on both ends. So it is very important when he's saying that meet luck halfway, or have a bright and positive attitude, expect only good things happening, and they happen. Is And that is where later on he talks about those the girl and her mother who went with their father, who knew how to, you know place bets on the race horses, and they had no clue they were going. It was in that innocence of not knowing how it works, but just for the fun of it, they were doing it and they were winning. So that is where, and then, once you start having, and then after some time, you keep conditions on it. Unless I have it, unless I don't win, then what will happen? And that is where then the problems start arising. So he said that, um, where he's talking about how he went to Mexico. Why did he go to Mexico? He thought America, as he just said, that America is not a place to live because people are, always restless. Probably Mexico will give me that peace that, yeah, I'm looking for. People are more different. And again, because he's expecting Lady Luck, it's just, manifesting in that way. He's invited to stay with some people. Reminds us of that chapter in Autobiography of a Yogi, two penniless boys, when Ananta, his brother, Master's brother, sent them off with one-way ticket, and gives various conditions. And Master was, so, it was similar situation, but here Swamiji is just, depending on very positive attitude without any doubt, very concentrated. And Master was, he had complete faith on God, complete, no doubt, anything. I mean, where Jitendra says, let's just keep a little bit of coin at least to come back home. We should have ticket ka paisa. And Master says, no, if you do that, I'm not going on this. He was completely, the faith was 100%, not even a wing, an ounce of doubt. Similarly, Swamiji was also going in, in a complete, without realizing that he was actually working on that principle. And he noticed that it was happening for him, that he keeps getting. And in fact, he goes, that nephew who also using him as an extra driver, paying him, so he's getting to earn also money. And he says, this is again a takeaway for us. He says, I have tested this principle many times since then, in learning to write music, to play musical instruments, to paint, to understand some of the deeper aspects of numerous subjects, both abstract and practical, to attract money when I needed it, to found a successful community, and to receive helpful answers to countless questions, whether during meditations or while working or lecturing. Always the system has taken me far deeper into my subject than intellectual study alone. So, what is the principle? The principle I discovered is to put oneself completely in tune with whatever subject one wants to master. Inborn talent, yes, he says, has is helpful, but it is not nearly so important as deep concentration. So the more we are completely concentrated on what we want, these days people, we all, most of us, like multitasking, that's become the very fashionable thing. But he's saying that doing one thing at a time is very important. So only then we can, develop that uh, concentration and are not restless. So anyone can do well if he will attune himself sensitively to his subject and resolutely exclude from his mind any thought of the tasks. So, going to the core of that, whatever task one wants to achieve with deep concentration and just going for it. And he says that you can. The principle has its ramification. He says, I have learned that a strong positive affirmation of success is more effective when it is sensitively attuned to one's goal and protected from the thought of possible failures. So again, that's what when we take up a affirmation, we say, oh, I'm going to say it all the time. Then there is, even if we have this one thought like, does this really work? Many times it happens. It will not work. So it has to be like, yes, it works every time. It will work. And that is the kind of attitude one needs, very positive attitude. And with deep concentration, for success, deep concentration is needed, is what he's talking about. Okay, then here again, he's this part that he's talking about, you're in perfect health when he was falling sick. This he had written in the Art and Science of Raj Yoga also, that he says that poor person will get it's a mind power, because it's a willpower to get well, because they can't, their reason is they can't afford it, like how Swamiji said, like no, he can't afford 2 weeks stay in hospital. So within 2 days he said, I left hospital fully cured. And he says that rich patients, the longer time spent there caused their paralysis to become ingrained. That is the kind of power of the mind. In Autobiography of a Yogi, Lahiri Mahashaya says that thought is a force, just like electricity or gravitation. So it is like, it has the power, the mind through your mind, because of when you put up a very intense thought from your mind, it comes to pass. So we need to be very careful what kind of thoughts we are putting out, and whether it is positive, and not allowing even a little bit of negativity to seep in. That is something, that's a practice that we all need to do. So this is again, there are so many takeaways in this chapter, like through the week, let us try that, staying positive and not allowing in any situation, allowing that doubt to creep in, and doing everything with deep concentration. Anything, even a very simple thing like chopping vegetables can be a completely concentrated, uh, that is how we practice in small things, so that we can manifest that in bigger things, right? Okay, he says, um, okay, I had hoped, if nothing else. So this again, he realized that if nothing else, to find more laughter, more human warmth, more inspiration. He thought if he goes to countryside, he goes to a simpler place, then people might be different. What he was looking for cannot be found outside of ourselves. He was seeking it out in other people, in changing places. If we go to, people go to on vacation saying that I will feel better maybe couple of days. After that, it will all, because we are not, we are running away from a situation, we are running away from people, we are running away from the place. But this is where we, it is all there. Everything is in our mind. So where do we run away from? So that is what he's talking about, that what I was experiencing was only my own happy sense of adventure. It's like that musk deer that master used to talk about. The musk deer has that beautiful smell as it grows up in its navel, and it's wanting to know where is it coming from. So it keeps running here and there, helter skelter. It's not finding. Finally, it jumps down from the hill, thinking that probably it's there. It falls to its death, and then the hunter comes, picks up the musk from it, and sells it as a perfume. It's right there. Each one of us has the joy, the happiness, everything is within us. But we are seeking it in the outside world. We think that changing. So that's why he's saying travel, it's not going to help. Travel is a fool's paradise. You just need to travel within. As Master always used to say, carry your portable paradise. The paradise is within. So Swamiji is yet to realize, but he is coming to his own conclusions. he's finding out that this. So there's masters that India. I mean, we have this philosophy, Indian philosophy. There's six, but three more most important philosophies are Sankhya, Yoga, and Vedanta. The Sankhya master says why should we seek an answer. Vedanta is what is the destination. So I say that all that seeking has happened, and the final destination is God. That is Vedanta. And then yoga comes in, which says how. So how to seek. Yeah, okay, this I don't want. Why I need to seek? God is, Sankhya is telling me how to seek is what is yoga. So Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, it starts with that. The first sutra says, now we come to the study of yoga, which means there has been a lot of study that has happened, which is Sankhya. And right now, what Swamiji is going through is the Sankhya, that neither this, not that. I don't want to become famous. I don't want this. I don't want that. Studies are not helping me. So he's moving towards that, where he finally finds the answer in when master comes through Kriya Yoga. He finds the how of it, because then master will, and he already knows God is the final answer, but he doesn't. He's still not figured out how. A how is where he will finally meet master and figure out. So this has been a beautiful chapter. So many takeaways. I'll write in the group what all I can think of. Anything else you all want to add, you can also add there. And let's practice it through the week, or as long as we want to. So thank you all for joining. Anybody?
Thank you, Jayanti.